Hi, everybody. Welcome to the NHGA's World Handicap System seminar today. If you can all just do me a quick favor and type into the chat box that you can hear me and also see my screen right now, that'd be really helpful. All right, thank you guys. All right, so we'll get started here. So for anybody, I think I know most people here on the call, but anybody who doesn't know me, my name's Kate Billings. I'm the Director of Communications and Member Services with the NHGA. I handle all of your GIN questions and anything course rating related. And so I'm kind of your go-to person there. So we'll kind of just dive right in. I'll give you like a brief overview of the World Handicap System. We'll go through the fundamentals of handicapping. We'll get into the handicap formula, the club handicap committee responsibilities, competition committee responsibilities, and the AGA responsibilities. The AGA is just the Allied Golf Association with the USGA, which is us here at the NHGA. So kind of get into our responsibilities here and how we'll help you out. Throughout the presentation today, there are some question slides. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and just type them into that chat box that we have. And I will stop on the question slides and read your questions and answer them to the best of my ability here. All right, so we'll just dive right in. So welcome to the World Handicap System. Prior to the World Handicap System, there were essentially 6 handicap systems in use around the world, as you can see with this map here. So the World Handicap System is just unifying all of these systems into one. Some of the themes that we'll see throughout this presentation is that the World Handicap System is really making handicaps more portable for golfers, allowing golfers to compete on a fair and equal basis all over the world. And basically golf is global as it is right now. So it just makes sense to make handicaps global for everybody. And you see here, this is just unifying all of them. All right, so the governance here, the World Handicap System is governed by the USGA and the RNA. The World Handicap System essentially is joining the rules of golf, rules of amateur status, and equipment rules. All 3 of those are all the same across the world here. So now the World Handicap System is joining that, which is really great for everybody. In kind of looking at the hierarchy, the USGA and RNA are the ones who write and interpret the rules of handicapping and the course rating system. And then it trickles down from there. So you have the National Association, ours is the USGA, and then from there, the Allied Golf Association, so that's us, and then clubs and players. Again, if you want to read more about the full rights of each of these parties here, you can read about that in the rules of handicapping. But I just want to give a brief overview and just kind of hammer home that the USGA and the RNA are the ones who write and interpret everything here, and it all stems down from there. So if you guys have any questions on those quick slides, feel free to let me know here. We'll kind of keep an eye on questions as we go. All right. And again, don't be afraid to just type them in here and I'll answer them when we get to a slide that looks like this. So the fundamentals of handicapping. All right, the World Handicap System includes the rules of handicapping and the course rating system. Its purpose is to enable as many golfers as possible the opportunity to obtain and maintain a handicap index, use their handicap index on any golf course around the world, and compete or play recreationally with anyone on a fair basis. Okay, so the 3 points that I'll continue to make here is that the World Handicap System is making the game more inclusive, so it makes it as easy as possible to get and maintain a handicap. It's portable from course to course and now country to country, as I've said before, and it makes it consistent. The calculation is consistent and players can compete on a fair and equal basis wherever they are. All right. So some key definitions. Again, I'll just briefly go through these definitions because each of these points we will get into deeper later into the presentation here. All right, so the low handicap index is the lowest handicap index achieved by a player within the last 12 months, which is then related to the hard and soft cap. So it's a reduction or limit on the increase of a player's handicap index over a rolling 12-month period, measured against the player's low handicap index within that period of time. The playing conditions calculation, this is new. It's a procedure used to evaluate if a course and or weather conditions on the day of play deviate from normal playing conditions to the extent that they have a significant impact on a player's performance. The exceptional score reduction, another new term, it's a score differential which is at least 7 strokes better than the player's handicap index at the time the round was played. Net double bogey is now the maximum score for a hole for handicap purposes, which is the sum of the par of the hole, any handicap strokes applied on that hole, and an additional 2 strokes. And net par is a new term for par plus, used for when a hole is not played here. So the course rating system. The USGA course rating system is already in use, not only in connection with the USGA handicap system from the past, but also with other existing handicap systems. So the course rating system addresses the portability of handicaps by adjusting a player's handicap index according to the relative difficulty of the golf course being played. All right, so really nothing new. We're just gonna go through the course rating system very briefly here. So a course rating is the evaluation of the playing difficulty of a course for scratch golfers under normal course and weather conditions. All right, so it is the evaluation of the difficulty of a course for a scratch golfer. And then we get a bogey rating. So when the course rating team goes out there, we're gathering data for the scratch rating and a bogey rating. Okay, so it's the evaluation of the playing difficulty of a course for bogey players under normal course and weather conditions. So keeping in mind here, just for your reference, a bogey golfer is considered, for women, it's women with about a 24 handicap, and men, it's about a 20 handicap. That's what we consider a bogey golfer. And then the slope rating. So to calculate the slope rating for any set of tees, we need both the course rating and the bogey rating. And it's the combination of these measures that allow us to calculate the slope rating for a set of tees. So the slope measures the relative difficulty between the scratch and the bogey golfer. And a course of standard relative difficulty has a slope rating of 113. All right, so all the same concepts here from the past. So now we're going to just get into the course handicap here. So under the rules of handicapping, a course handicap will be the number of strokes a player receives to play down to the par of the tees being played. All right, so you see the formula here. In black, the handicap index times slope rating divided by 113. That's the same as before, but now we're adding the math for course rating minus par. All right, so prior to the world handicap system, the course handicap was the number of strokes needed to play to the course rating. So now the course handicap is the number of strokes needed to play to par. Okay, so par is going to be our benchmark, and par is a lot more significant in the world handicap system. It plays a role with the course handicap as you see here, but also will affect net double bogey and net par for when golfers are going out there playing. I'll kind of get into the USGA's position on par a little bit later, but they have kind of released a statement to us that they would like to see par the same across all tee sets, at least per gender, unless it's absolutely necessary to have a different par. I can think of at least a couple courses in this state where par would change from tee set to tee set just based on where those tees are. But again, I'll get into that a little bit later. So we'll just take a look at the calculation here. We're going to kind of compare the old system, which was without the course rating minus par, and the new system that has it. So here we're taking a look at somebody with a 0 handicap index and somebody with 15. All right, so on this course, just a fictional course here, you'll see that across all T sets here, their course handicap is 0. It doesn't change. And then for the 15 handicap across all the T sets, there's really just a 3-stroke difference from the shortest tees to the longest tees. So you'll see from the gold tees, they have a 15, and from black, they have an 18. And that's with a over 2,000 yard difference. So I think you'll see here, so for the 0 handicap scratch golfer here, we saw this table on the left already, but here on the right, it's using the world handicap system calculation for a course handicap, which has course rating minus par. And now we're seeing a greater difference between the tee sets, okay? They're not just a 0 across the board. So from those black tees, the most difficult tees, they are 2. And from gold, they're actually +5, okay? That's just based on the new calculation here. All right, and the 15 handicap. So now we're seeing a 10-stroke difference from gold to black. I do think that you'll see that golfers are going to like this, just kind of across the board, the greater difference there. All right, so this term is new, but it's really not different. So playing handicap basically takes the handicap allowance here. So it's your course handicap times the allowance, okay? If different tees are in use, a player's playing handicap is adjusted by the difference in par. And again, if we're keeping par the same across all tee sets here per gender, then you really won't have a change. You won't have to make a further adjustment here, okay? So one thing I do want to note with the playing handicap is that it's a little bit different in that rounding of this only is happening one time, okay? So in the old system, you would take the course handicap, get that whole number, okay, and then multiply it by the handicap allowance, and then again get another whole number. So rounding was happening twice, but now it's happening just once. So you're doing that course handicap calculation, still taking decimal place, and then taking the handicap allowance on top of that, and then rounding at the very end. So just one time it's being rounded. If any of you guys, I know a lot of people are using Golf Genius. If you go into their knowledge base and search playing handicap, they actually have a really great explanation of it, and they kind of give you an example of how their playing handicap could be different just based on rounding. So if anybody really has a question on that, just keep in mind that rounding is different now in the world handicap system. All right, and we'll just see that example here. All right, so the minimum number of scores to obtain a handicap index. So now it is 54 holes made up of any combination or 9 or 18 holes. Okay, so basically 3 18-hole rounds in their scoring record will give them a handicap index. Prior to that, in the old system, it was 5 18-hole scores. So this kind of just goes back to inclusivity and encouraging golfers that play more sporadically to establish a handicap index, just making it easier for them to get that number. Okay, there's no time limit on completing the submission of these scores, but it's strongly recommended that initial scores are submitted hole by hole to better assess the potential of the player. Okay. So maximum handicap index. All right, so it's now 54, and it's 54 for both men and women. Previously, I will say that it was men's maximum handicap index was 36.4 and women was 40.4. But now it's 54 across the board, and that's just to be as inclusive and accessible as possible, to make it as easy as possible for golfers to obtain and maintain a handicap index. All right, so it really helps higher handicappers here to really better track their progress, stay motivated, have more fun, and just keep playing the game, which I think that's kind of what we're all looking for, is get more people playing and continue to play. Okay, so maximum score for handicap purposes. This is a new term. It is net double bogey. This is replacing equitable stroke control that we know from before. So we'll get into this a little bit. So basically, it is a similar principle of even the best golfers have bad holes, and one bad hole shouldn't define a player's ability. Okay, so keeping with that equitable stroke control theme there, but now it's net double bogey. So basically, here's the calculation. It is taking par of the hole, adding 2 for double bogey, and then handicap strokes received, we're adding those or given or subtracting, okay? So a player with a course handicap of 11 receives 1 stroke allocated. On a par 4 hole with index 6, the player's net double bogey score is calculated as follows. Okay, so par 4, 2 for the double bogey, and then they get 1 stroke there. So their maximum score for this hole is 7. And just another example here, this person's course handicap is 18. All right, and kind of just look at the scores they're posting here. And we see on 17, they actually made an 8, but for score posting purposes, we have to calculate their net double bogey, okay, which is actually a 7, just based on they get 1 stroke per hole. It's a par 4. Double bogey brings it to 6, and then adding the 1 gets you to 7. All right. So for competition purposes, this person did make a 95, but for score posting and handicap purposes, it is a 94 that would be posted. All right, so we have some new guidelines for the most likely score, okay? So when a player starts but does not complete a hole, the score recorded for handicap purposes is the most likely score. All right, so here are the guidelines. So basically, we're taking the position of the ball and then determining what stroke should be added. So based on this, it's on the green within 5 feet of the hole, we're going to add 1 stroke. Okay, then if you're between 5 feet and 20 yards from the hole, you're adding 2 or 3 strokes, depending on the position of the ball, the difficulty of the green, and the ability of the player. Okay, and then beyond 20 yards from the hole, we're either adding 3 or 4 strokes. Again, depending on the position of the ball, the difficulty of the green, and the ability of the player. Okay, so this comes into effect for a hole that's not completed, but was started. Okay, so it provides more consistency for score posting in match play and other formats where a player picks up on a hole. All right, it just takes the subjectivity out of it a little bit more. So for holes not played, the term we're using is net par. This is not a change. We're calling it net par now. It was par plus. So it's basically you're taking par of the hole plus any handicap strokes that that player would receive on that hole. So same concept here that we had in the past. So acceptability of scores. These are not a change. These are the same, but I do want to go through these just to have them covered here. Okay. So acceptable scores to be posted. Scores from an authorized format of play, which meets all the provisions set out within the rules of handicapping. Scores in both match play and stroke play, including multi-ball or team competitions where players have not completed 1 or more holes or players are requested to pick up when out of contention on a hole. And scores on all courses with a current and slope made during an active season, both at home and away. And some more here. Scores made under the rules of golf and the modified rules of golf for players with disabilities. When accompanied by at least 1 other person. This isn't new, but it is something to keep reminding people that if they're going out there playing alone, they can't post a score. So they have to play with at least 1 other person. And when a player follows a model local rule, even if the committee has not adopted it, for example, the alternative option to stroke in distance or preferred lies. And on the other hand, so unacceptable scores, all right? A score is not acceptable for handicap purposes. It must not be posted to a player scoring record if a player has been disqualified from a competition for a breach of the rules of golf that might have provided the player with a significant advantage. For example, using a non-conforming club. Other examples are foursomes, where it's also known as alternate shots, scrambles, or when they're being coached. I do want to note here that a score could be acceptable if a player is DQ'd from a competition if they did not receive a significant advantage. One example of that is, signing an incorrect scorecard, where they basically played under all the rules, they followed everything, they just happened to sign for a wrong score, and they happen to get DQ'd in that situation. That score in that circumstance should still be posted. All right. So treatment of 9-hole scores and combining. This is not a change, I just want to go over it again. Okay, so 2 9-hole scores that are posted to a player's scoring record will combine into an 18-hole score differential. Okay. So they will combine in the order that they are received. So again, it is important to kind of just post right away and post on the day that you play. If a player plays 7 or more holes, but fewer than the minimum number of holes for an 18-hole score to be posted, then the 9-hole score will be posted and then combined with the next 9-hole score. So to that point, the minimum number of scores for 18-hole rounds, you need to have played at least 14 holes to post an 18-hole score. Okay, in the old system it was 13, now it is 14. Okay. So fewer than 9 holes played. All right, not a change. You have to have played a minimum of 7 holes to post a 9-hole score. Okay. If a player plays 7 or 8 holes, a 9-hole score will be produced by adding a score of net par for the remaining holes. We just talked about net par. Okay. This 9-hole score must then be accompanied by another 9-hole score to produce an 18-hole differential. All right, and we'll keep in mind here that a hole is deemed to have been played if it's been started. Okay, so if they've started the hole, then they're going to use the most likely score. If they haven't played a hole, then they're using net par. And then the time frame for submitting a score. A player should submit their score as soon as possible on the day of play, and preferably before midnight. Midnight is when that revision is going to happen. And we'll get into daily revisions in a little bit. If a player does not submit their score on the day of play, their score will not be included within the daily playing conditions calculation. That's something we'll get into a little bit later as well. And when the score is subsequently posted to the player scoring record, the published playing conditions calculation for the day should be applied to the player's score differential first calculation. Okay. So we'll get into the PCC again in a little bit and explain that, but it is going to be important to kind of hammer home to all the golfers here that it is important to post on the day you play. Basically, as soon as you play, as soon as you finish playing, you should post your score. All right, so I'll check to see if we have any questions come in here. Okay, Paul, as far as net double bogey is concerned, is the course to be rated for medal play as opposed to match play? The course is basically, it's going to be rated for just all formats of play. I guess I'll just put that shortly. If you guys have any more questions, I can certainly check on that again. Just let me know. So now we'll just dive into the handicap formula. All right. So there are 5 significant changes to the handicap index calculation here. All right. The first is the minimum number of scores required. The next is the number of differentials used, which is 8 of 20. The playing conditions calculation, an exceptional score reduction that considers all scores, and the addition of a soft cap and a hard cap to limit upward movement. Okay, so the goal of this is to make handicaps inclusive, modern, and consistent, like I mentioned before. All right, so the number of differentials being used here. Okay, so this chart is in the rules of handicapping, but I'll talk about it a little bit here. So basically, you're taking how many scores a player has. If they have 3, 4, or 5, we're using the lowest one differential in their record. And then we're taking that adjustment. That adjustment column is new. Okay, so it acts as a safeguard to ensure the field is protected from players with minimal scores. Okay, so this adjustment we'll see happen with 3, 4, and 6. We skipped 5, but 6 is when we start to take the lowest 2. So we need that adjustment again. Okay, so basically with limited scoring information, a downward adjustment is necessary to project a player's ability. It said that a player will play to their ability 1 out of every 5 rounds. Okay, so there is a chance that they haven't played to their ability yet when they have fewer, like 3 or 4 scores in their record, okay? But again, this table is in the rules of handicap in case anybody has questions on how many differentials are being used. But when we get to 20 and beyond that, we are going to be using the lowest 8. All right. So the calculation of score differential. Basically, this calculation is the same, but now we're adding the additional math for the playing condition calculation adjustment. All right, so not much different here. We'll keep in mind that the playing condition calculation is going to be conservative in nature. So the majority of time it's going to be 0. So really that score differential calculation is going to be the same as it was in the past. And not a new concept, but just a little reminder here, is that a lower score may not always produce a lower score differential. In this case, you see that the higher score is actually producing the lowest differential. Really just depends on the course rating, the slope, and what they scored here. So the calculation of a handicap index here. So under the old system, we were using 10 of the last 20 score differentials with a 96% for excellent. Okay, so now in the new system, you'll see that we're using 8 of 20. This allows for greater responsiveness to good scores, and then it eliminates that need for the bonus for excellence, which that bonus could be hard to explain to some people if they ever had a question about it. So now it really just eliminates that. We're using 8 of 20. And here is just a sample scoring record. On the left, you see it under the old system what their index was, and now under the new system what their index is. All right, and so really impact is going to be minimal for golfers, and it really just depends on their handicap and whether their scores are consistent or volatile, kind of across the board there. And as I'm sure most of you know, that the scoring records from the previous system are being carried over to calculate a player's handicap index under the World Handicap System. So now we'll get into the playing conditions calculation. All right. So when adverse weather conditions or abnormal course setup causes scores to be unusually high or low on a given day, a playing condition calculation will adjust score differentials to better reflect the player's actual performance. All right, so like I said before, it's going to be conservative in nature, so we may not see it very often. It's going to adjust the differentials in a range from -1 to +3 here. So the more scores posted which are above or below expected based on the rating and slope and the handicap index of players, the more likely an adjustment will happen. Okay, I do want to note, this is an automatic calculation that's purely driven by data and those scores that are being posted. So this playing conditions calculation is nothing that any of you have to worry about. It's an automatic calculation. All right, so it is performed once a day. It considers acceptable scores submitted on a course, including all rated Ts and both genders, and requires at least 8 acceptable scores submitted by players with a handicap index of 36 or below. All right, so it needs at least 8 scores from players with 36 or below handicap. That's important to note here. All right, it's applied to the calculation of score differentials for all players though. So even if their score was not used in determining if the PCC is going to be applied that day, they're still going to get that adjustment. And it includes both 9 and 18 hole acceptable scores. All right, so the PCC could actually be a good indicator for whether the course rating needs to be reviewed, or if maybe the course setup, how it's being set up, needs to be reviewed. So if we're seeing this PCC 4 to 5 times a week, then that's something that I'll talk about with you, and we'll talk about how the course is being set up. Is it being set up easier or harder than what it was rated to? Or really, is the rating actually a little bit off, and do we need to adjust it? So certainly something that we can keep an eye on. Again, it is automatic. So something else that's automatic here is the exceptional score reduction. All right, this is replacing 10-3 for tournament scores. Okay, so the exceptional score reduction is a procedure for dealing with exceptional scores, which may indicate the player's true ability. The procedure considers all scores rather than tournament scores. So in the past, it was just T scores. Now it's any score. So how does it work? So we calculate the score differential once a score is posted and the playing conditions calculation is applied, if it's applied. We calculate the new handicap index. If the score differential is 7 strokes or better than the handicap index from when the round was played, we're going to apply the ESR table reduction. Okay, so we see this table here on the right. So if it's 7 to 9.9 strokes lower, then the adjustment is -1. Okay, if it's 10 strokes or more lower, then we're taking a -2 adjustment. All right. This is in addition to any reduction caused by a score being used in an updated 8 of 20 calculation. All right, so again, I'll just reiterate, it considers any score that's being posted, only needs 1 score for this to happen, okay, and applies that adjustment to the previous 20 score differentials, and this is automatic. All right, and the more a golfer plays following the reduction, the less impact the ESR is going to have here. Okay, so we'll take a look at an example here. Here's a player's scoring record. So the player posted an exceptional score on 5/22, which resulted in a -1 adjustment to the previous 20. Oop, a little too far. All right, so we see that adjustment here based on that score. So the player posted a second exceptional score on 9/5, which resulted in a -1 adjustment to their previous 20. So in this example, we actually see that the -1 is happening twice, okay? It can be cumulative here, keeping that in mind. And then any scores you'll see here posted after do not have the -1 adjustment. So that just kind of goes back to the more the golfer plays following the reduction, the less impact that ESR is going to have. Eventually, it will just work its way out the more golf that they play. All right. This is just something for you guys to be aware of. It is automatic. You don't have to do anything, but if a player questions why they have this reduction, you'll be able to answer that. All right, so the memory of the low handicap index. Okay, so this is going to be tied to the soft cap and hard cap procedures. Okay, so the low handicap index represents the demonstrated ability of a player over the 365-day period preceding the most recent score in the player's scoring record and provides a reference point against which the current handicap index can be compared. All right, so the low handicap index, I'll keep going here. It's established once they have 20 scores in their scoring record. If they have fewer than 20 scores, then they're not going to have a low handicap index. And then the soft and hard cap will not apply to them, not until they have 20 scores. And keep in mind that it can become more than 365 days old, this low handicap index, in a period between 2 rounds being played. So in this example that we see here, on 4/25/21, a golfer submitted a score which produced a handicap index of 7.1. The low handicap index at this time is 6.2, which was from 5/5/2020. All right, and so the golfer plays again on 5/16/21. The low handicap index of 6.2 would still be used for the cap procedure, even though it's more than 12 months old. Okay, and then upon recalculation the next day, a new low handicap index would be set. All right. So the limit on the upward movement. I do want to note that no limit on the max which index can decrease. It can go down as much as we can, but when it comes to your handicap index should never increase more than 5 strokes above your low handicap index over a rolling 12-month period. All right. So that's kind of where the soft cap and hard cap are going to come in here. Okay, so there's the 2 trigger points. Okay, a soft cap and hard cap will be implemented to limit the extreme upward movement of a player's handicap index within a 12-month period. The soft cap will suppress the upward movement by 50% after a 3-stroke increase over the low handicap index has been reached. And then the hard cap will restrict upward movement to 5 strokes over the low handicap index. And again, this procedure only comes into play when the player has at least 20 acceptable scores in their scoring record, which then gives them the low handicap index, which is basically the anchor of the system. The system ensures temporary loss in form doesn't cause an index to move too far from a level consistent with their demonstrated ability. Okay, so we'll get into an example here. These examples, it could be kind of confusing to follow the math on how this happens, but just bear with me here. Again, this procedure is something that happens automatic. So you won't have to worry about doing anything yourself. The system does it itself, but I just want to make you aware of how it happens. So here's the soft cap example. So a player has a low handicap index of 10. His current 8/20 is 15.2 after posting his most recent score. Okay, so step 1, we're going to subtract the low handicap index from the current 8/20 average. So 15.2 minus 10 gives us 5.2. Then we determine how much greater than 3 the result is. So we take 5.2 minus 3, and we get 2.2. Step 3, we're going to subtract 50% of the resulting value from the 8/20 average. All right, so 15.2 minus 1.1 is going to give us 14.1, and that's what their handicap index will be after that soft cap is applied. All right, and now the hard cap example. So they have a low handicap index of 10, and now their current 8/20 is 17.4. So kind of going through those same steps here, we have 17.4 minus 10, so that's 7.4. Then we determine how much greater than 3 the result is, which is 4.4. All right, then we're taking 50% of that, so 17.4 minus 2.2 brings us to 15.2. But this is where the hard cap comes into play. Okay, because when you take 15.2 and subtract that from 10, it's 5.2. But if we remember, a handicap index can never increase more than 5 strokes. So that's when the hard cap comes in, and it's restricted right there to 15. It's never going to go more than 5 strokes higher. All right, I know it can be kind of confusing. It's automatic, and if you ever have a question about it, you can certainly reach out to me. All right. And then lastly, in this section, we'll just get into the daily revision. So under the rules of handicapping, a handicap index will update the day after a score is posted. Okay, so play scores as soon as possible is completed and before midnight. to ensure that will be used for the playing conditions calculation, and a handicap index can also be revised by a committee adjustment. Okay, revision is going to happen if a player posts or if a score was adjusted by the committee. We'll see an adjustment. If plays twice in a day and posts those, still that adjustment is happening one time, and it's happening at midnight after that. All right. So, do we have any questions after all of that? I know that was kind of a lot of information to kind of gather. All right, I'll check back here in a little bit. All right, so the club handicap committee responsibilities. So one of the responsibilities is for handicap review. It's strongly recommended that the handicap committee conducts a handicap review at least once a year for all players, which it is responsible. So WHS compliant technology does provide reports to assist handicap committees identify those players during a handicap review. And a player can also request to have a handicap review if they believe their handicap index no longer reflects their demonstrated ability. I'm just going to pause for 1 second here. So, Barbara, I do see your question. Will players know when a cap has been applied? I don't believe that there is any indication in their scoring record. I can double check for you on that. But I believe there's not any kind of indication there. But if they do have a question, they can certainly either reach out to you or reach out to us on, why their handicap, if they were to just do an 8 of 20 calculation, why it's not higher. All right, and a player must be made aware of and be involved in the handicap review process and be able to appeal a decision that is made. All right, so we'll kind of dive into the review. A review could involve the analysis of any of or all of the following information. Frequency of score submissions in the last 12 months versus the previous 12-month cycle, deviations from the expected scoring performance for the player, the trend of the player's handicap index, difference in the player's handicap index over the last 12 months or 24 months, the player's scoring record history, percent of acceptable scores submitted at a player's home club, percent of acceptable scores from 9-hole rounds, any scores from or performances known in non-authorized formats of play, comparison of average score differentials in match play versus stroke play formats of play, and comparison of average score differentials between competitive and casual rounds. All that being said, I do think that you all at your club, if you're part of the handicap committee, kind of know these golfers a little bit more than at least we do here at the NHGA. So I think taking local knowledge at your home club there should be considered. Some of that local knowledge could be aging of the golfer, if they have an illness or injury, or declining score potential due to frequency of playing, or even if they're improving so much so, keeping that in mind if they're playing a lot more. But certainly local knowledge should be considered when reviewing. All right, so the handicap committee has the ability to adjust the handicap index. When a handicap review has been completed, the handicap committee can adjust the handicap index to better reflect their demonstrated based on the results of the analysis. Okay, adjustment must satisfy the following criteria: be a minimum of 1 full stroke, and except in exceptional circumstances, only increase a player's handicap index by up to 5 strokes above their low handicap index. Okay, there's no limit, again, as to how far downwards handicap index can be adjusted. All right. The handicap committee can adjust a player's handicap index to ensure that it reflects their demonstrated ability. In doing so, the handicap committee should consider all available information relating to the player's demonstrated ability. Okay, including the player's scoring potential, any handicaps previously held by the player, and whether the player is an improver, a steady player, or a declining player. The handicap committee should consult with or have ratified any player's handicap adjustment by the Allied Golf Association. Okay, so that is the NHGA. So if you're adjusting upward or downward, it must have the effect of freezing or modifying the handicap index for a defined period of time as defined by the handicap committee, or resetting the handicap index by applying an adjustment to each of the most recent 20 score differentials in the scoring record to achieve the chosen handicap index. And there is the ability in the new GIN admin portal to do this. All right, so applying a penalty score. This is not new, but I do want to go over it. So if a player fails to submit a score when an authorized format of play, from an authorized format of play, the handicap committee should investigate and take appropriate action. Okay, if the reason was valid and an acceptable score is still discoverable, that score should be posted. If there was no valid reason and an acceptable score is discoverable, that score will be posted. If the score is not discoverable, then a penalty score may be posted. Okay. In most serious cases, such as repeated failure to submit acceptable scores, the committee has the discretion to apply additional penalty scores, reset the player's handicap index, or consider other disciplinary procedures, right? Such as withdrawing a handicap index. The handicap committee or the AGA, so the NHGA, should withdraw the handicap index of a player who deliberately or repeatedly fails to comply with the player's responsibilities under the rules of handicapping. The withdrawal of a player's handicap index should be applied only after the player has been informed of and has had an opportunity to respond to the handicap committee. Okay, so we have to let that player know. And they have to know, be known of the period the handicap index withdrawal and any additional conditions here. And then reinstatement of a player's handicap index will be required when a player's handicap index has been withdrawn from a period of time, after which it will become eligible to be reinstated. So the committee here is determining the length of time a handicap will be withdrawn, okay, and how and when it will be reinstated. So here's a few considerations to determine the level of handicap index at which the player is to be reinstated. The handicap committee may wish to consider reinstating the handicap index at a level that the handicap committee feels is currently reflective of the player's demonstrated ability, applying the handicap allocation procedure as if the player were new to the game, or reinstating the last recorded handicap index. It is strongly recommended that under this option, the handicap committee monitors the player's handicap index closely over subsequent rounds, and where required, make appropriate adjustments. Okay, so after this, we are still going to keep an eye on that player pretty closely. Again, this is all in the rules of handicapping, the handicap committee responsibility. So if you have any questions on that, certainly you can read up on it here. Chuck, I do see your question here. It is recorded, and this presentation is recorded, and we will be able to send a link out to you after if you missed any of it. All right, any questions there? Next, we're kind of going to dive into the competition committee responsibilities. Okay, so the committee in charge of a competition may set a maximum limit for play within their terms of competition. All right, for example, a maximum handicap index for entry, a maximum handicap index a player is permitted to use, a maximum course handicap, or a maximum playing handicap. All right, so basically the competition committee determines who is eligible to compete, as well as the handicap a player can use. So, terms of competition example, a limit of 18 may be set by the committee, with higher handicap index players being restricted to playing from a handicap index of 18 for the purposes of that competition. Even though higher handicap players are restricted to playing from the handicap index of 18 in this particular example, their full course handicap should be used in determining the score to post for handicap purposes. All right. The committee in charge of a competition may reserve the right to adjust the playing handicap of an entrant within its terms of the competition where they have evidence that the player's handicap index does not reflect their demonstrated ability. Okay, so something important to note here, the competition committee cannot modify a handicap index, but they can modify the playing handicap for anyone playing in their competition. Okay. They do have that ability. They can't modify a handicap index, but they can modify the playing handicap. So multi-round competitions, kind of leading into 2020 here, and even here in the first couple months, we've gotten a few questions about multi-round competitions. So to kind of put it short, obviously handicap indexes are changing daily. So a lot of people ask, well, what do we do about indexes? What should we do? And our answer here is to basically set a date prior to the competition, maybe the day before or the day that it starts, and say, this is the date that we're using handicap index from, and carry that through the whole competition. It is important to note that at the end of a particular day of a competition, you should still be posting those scores, or the player should, but it is highly recommended that you use a date prior and just use that one date and carry it through the competition here. It's very similar to how it used to be, although handicap index is only changed on the 1st and 15th prior. It's not much different than saying we're using handicap indexes from June 15th, but now we can just dial it into one specific day. All right, and then we'll get into handicap allowances. So handicap allowances are recommended to provide equity for various forms of team competition. Under the rules of handicapping, the allowance recommendations will be the same for men and women, and we see that chart here. Prior, they were different for men and women, but now it is uniform across the board. It's no longer gender specific. Keep in mind, these are just recommendations. The committee should have final say in determining what allowance you are going to use. So this is also in the rules of handicapping. It's in Appendix C in case you're looking for it here. Any questions there? Feel free to type them in. I'll keep an eye on that. And we just have, I believe, one more section here. So the AGA responsibilities and administration of a handicap index. Again, Allied Golf Association is the AGA, and that is us, the NHGA, here in New Hampshire. So home club. To ensure that a player has only one handicap index and to easily identify the golf club or AGA with authority should issues arise, a player should have one home club. A home club is determined by the player and is typically determined by where the player submits the most recent scores or demonstrates regularity of play. Okay, so a player should have one handicap index and one scoring record, and they should designate their home club. A lot of players will play here in the summer months, and in the winter they will go down south and be a member at a club down there. So they really should determine which one is their home club and designate that. All right, so who issues the handicap index? Okay, this slide, I just want to note here that the USGA is the entity that issues a handicap index. All right, everything again just trickles down. Like I said before, the USGA and RNA are the ones who write and interpret the rules of handicapping, and then it trickles from there. But the USGA here is the entity that issues the handicap index. So stroke index allocation. So prior to the World Handicap System, there were two recommended methods to determine stroke index allocation, which basically required collecting a lot of scorecards. And it could be very difficult to follow those methods. Under the World Handicap System, and again, this is just a recommendation, but the recommendation is to use course rating data to rank the holes for stroke index allocation. And the course rating program that we use will give us a recommendation. By using course rating data, it's taking the subjectivity out of it a little bit. It's strictly using data. And then I do have to say, it is very, very highly recommended to have one allocation per gender, based on the most commonly rated. I would not recommend just different allocations per gender, okay? So right now, I've been going through taking scorecards and entering the stroke index allocations from your scorecard. If you'd like something different, if you want me to run the numbers from the course rating system, I certainly can do that. And then going forward, if your course gets re-rated in a given year, I will give you the recommended allocations based on the new numbers. And then you all at the club have the ability to use that or not use that. I mean, I could give you the whole 18-hole allocation here, and you could flip-flop one or two holes. Basically, I'm just trying to say is you all have the final say in your stroke index allocation. You know your course a little bit better, so if you don't fully agree, we can always change things. All right. So this, again, it does recommend using 3-hole clusters and keeping the 1 and 2 stroke holes in the middle cluster, as you'll see in this example here. All right. And certain procedures should also be considered to accommodate both stroke and match play formats. Okay, so spreading stroke index allocations evenly over the 18 holes to give the best chance of strokes being received by a player prior to a match ending. Applying the second lowest stroke index hole, 3 or 4, on each 9 in either the first or third triad, unless the lowest stroke index hole has been allocated in that same triad. And if possible, avoid consecutive low stroke indexes, 6 or less, on consecutive holes. Stroke index allocations for strokes 19 to 36 and 37 to 54, just simply repeat the order of the stroke index allocation. And that was previously set. All right. And then next, we'll just kind of get into par. And basically, as I've mentioned before a few times now, par plays a big role in the World Handicap System, so it's important that we establish the correct par. But I do have to say that the USGA has released a statement about par, basically saying that they would like us to keep par the same across all T sets, at least per gender, to just be consistent around the entire United States with that as people play from course to course. They do have this table in one of the appendixes, I think it's Appendix F, that will give you recommended par. Obviously, you'll see some overlap in yardages here, so it's really based on how the hole is designed to be played. But they do definitely want to see par, at least per gender, be the same across all the T sets that you have, unless it's absolutely necessary. I can think of at least at Eastman on their back 9, they have a particular hole that for a couple T sets, it is a par 4, and then other T sets, it's a par 3. So in that certain circumstance, then we'll have different par. But it's not that way everywhere. So this is something I need to publish in the course rating system as well. So if I reach out to you asking for your scorecard or your input on par, please get back to me as soon as possible so we can get that up and running before April 1st here. All right, the temporary rated sets of T's here. This is a very similar procedure, but slightly different. This is also in the book in Appendix G, but I can kind of read this to you. When a T has not been rated, the following protocol can be used. So you're going to locate the nearest set of rated T's for the appropriate gender, determine the measured difference between the set of T's being played and the rated set, And then for differences under 100 yards, there's no adjustment necessary, and scores can be returned or posted as usual. And then for differences between 100 to 300 yards, a table value can be used to determine a temporary course rating and slip rating. Again, that table can be found in the rules of handicapping as well. And then adjustments that are beyond 300 yards are not acceptable to be posted. If somebody is kind of consistently playing an unrated tee set that is beyond the 300-yard mark, certainly talk to me. I think that we might be able to get an additional tee added into the course rating system to your course, or even combo tee sets are very common these days. I can help you out with that. Those are very easy to add in. So if you have any questions there, certainly let me know. And then to that note, permanent modification of courses. If you guys are doing construction or anything that's permanent, reach out to me and we'll kind of evaluate if we need to get a full re-rating done to your course or just particular holes re-rated to take into account these modifications that you've made. So just something to reach out to me about here. All right, so any questions there? John, I see your question. Are you going to change our handicap hole automatically, or do you have to ask me? I have to change it in the course rating system if you change your allocations. So just reach out to me with what your allocations are. All right. So with that, kind of reach the end here. I've mentioned in emails before that everybody, at least one person from each club needs to complete the club handicap assessment from the USGA in order to continue to administer handicaps to your golfers. So this was your first step attending this seminar with me. Appreciate you all taking the time and spending some time. I will, within the next 10 minutes, email out the link to everybody who attended today. Again, thank you all. If you can all complete that assessment as soon as possible. If you can't do it today, maybe tomorrow, but as soon as you can, just while the information is kind of fresh in your mind, I will also email the PDF of the rules of handicapping again. Those will also get distributed. We'll mail some out to you as well with some other supporting materials for the World Handicap System for your golfers. But again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You should all have my email, or you can call the office. Happy to help you out. But if there's no more questions, let's see, I think I see one may have just come in. Nope. But if there's no more questions, feel free. I think we're all set here. Thank you all again for attending.